Mike, tell us a little bit about the background to yourself and EuroSETI.
From my own point of view, I've been interested in UFOs since the Warminster days in the 1960s, 70s, when I spent a lot of time there looking at all these mysterious lights. And obviously once you've seen one or two, you get hooked, you want to keep on seeing them. But I was pretty convinced that 90% of what I was seeing was Earth-like type activity, i.e. not machines, just balls of light, just balls of energy. And my interest kind of waned off a little once that Warminster quietened down. But it was resurrected when I met a guy called John Bannerberg. John is a businessman who had what can only be called a close experience of a real craft type UFO. And because of our mutual business interests, we got involved one night talking about electronics, and he just came out with this story about UFOs, and I said I was interested, and it went on from there. Together with one of his friends, James Devereux, we decided to form EuroSETI, ideally at first to set up an organisation that would bring all these fragmented people in UFO sightings together, rather like MUFON in the States. But that didn't get much interest from the groups, unfortunately, so we decided to go our own way, and every year we put £5,000 in the pot, so we've got £15,000 each year, and we just use it whichever way we can in the UFO field.
Yeah. Now, EuroSETI was formed some 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I suspect that most people out there in the UFO community who are not familiar either with your good self or your colleagues or indeed EuroSETI will have been somewhat surprised to see that name attached to an impending seminar, if you will, that will be taking place in a very, very short period of time, from the 24th to the 26th of January, at Britain's National Space Centre in Leicester. Now, what compelled you and your colleagues to bring this event about?
We considered doing something similar for many years, but I think with what we've got from the Soho satellite from our friends in Spain, it really seemed a really good opportunity to show people, we believe for the first time, evidence of craft that can only be craft. They can't really argue it's anything else but that. And the second thing that really made us do it was that there are some pretty odd statements coming from both camps at the moment. Earlier on this year, because the editor of Flying Saucer Review wanted to retire, perfectly legitimate you would think at 70 years old, you have pages and pages of UFOs are not being seen anymore, ufology is dead, etc. On the other hand, you've got something like Jill Tarter, the director of SETI in the States, saying that ET activity in our solar system should not be thought of as improbable, which is an incredible statement. They both can't be true, but one is getting a lot of coverage, the negative side. The positive side is getting absolutely no coverage at all. So we thought this would be an ideal time to show people what we've got and let them make their own minds up.
Okay, before we take a brief look, and it has to be brief because we know that all of this is now geared up for this, what promises to be an extraordinary weekend, and this entire interview, if you will, it is being generated to, again, attract people to this event, because we need to get the message out loud and clear that we're not talking about spurious images here. We're talking about something solid, something credible, that in itself is incredible to most people. So we're here to promote that event. How did you first come to learn that something extraordinary was happening out there in our solar system, in our backyard of space, so to speak?
About 2 years ago, you asked me for some information on CCDs, if you remember, charged couple devices and cameras, and the gentleman who gave me the information had actually heard of a guy called Jose Estania, who's Spanish-based near Barcelona, and Jose and his family are quite rich, so he really doesn't have to spend much time on his business, and he's spending a lot of time bringing down images from the Soho satellite. That was his major interest, was just sun, corona, sunspot activity, this kind of thing. But then he started seeing the kinds of things you're seeing on the screen at the moment, which absolutely fascinated him. Although he was a UFO person, he just found it so fascinating that he started to get his name known in Spain. And Dragan Gazadovic, who was the guy who gave us the information, heard about this and put us in touch. And after that, Jose started sending me the images so that we could put them on our EDIX computer system and enhance them and see whether we could get any further detail out from them.
Now, it would be fair to say, correct me if I'm wrong, but prior to making any kind of announcements or declarations, if you like, a considerable deal of research has been undertaken by yourself and your colleagues, indeed Jose, to try and come up with some kind of explanation for these images that we're shortly about to see. Am I correct?
Yes, certain of the images, he went to NASA Direct to ask what would you consider these things were, because he was convinced, as I was, that as NASA seemed to have made no effort to disguise them or lose the images, that they would know what they were. And they gave us again what we felt were very spurious types of arguments of what these lights were, and he shot down almost every one of them. And since then we basically left it alone and just taken what we've got to get the most possible detail out of them.
Mm. Would it be fair to say that the explanations that have been offered by NASA to, if you like, the sceptical community, and in that bracket I put the scientific and astronomical community per se, would it be fair to say that these explanations by NASA are good enough for them? Or might these images begin to persuade some in the scientific and astronomical community that no, that can't be right, that there has to be something other, something else to this?
I think what absolutely fascinates me is when these images started to get out is exactly the time the Vatican suddenly decided that maybe there were UFOs after all. The lady from SETI, Jill Tarter, said ET craft within our solar system shouldn't be thought of as improbable now. All seems to come together. I think they know this can't be held back very much longer, and they will have to come out and tell us something. It seems odd that these kind of movements of the way they look at UFOs are happening at the same time that we're getting all these fascinating images. It seems inconceivable to me that the two things are not linked.
Just to clarify a couple of quick points before we look at some of the images. It's not just the SOHO satellite that we're talking about, is it?
No, it isn't.
There is another satellite involved.
Yeah, that was the first time we had information from NASA that didn't match up. We had 3 images that were taken on the SOHO satellite, and they said, no, these are CCD artifacts, as they call them, which is when one CCD doesn't react properly and gives a light spot. So we looked at the LASCO satellite, which is on pretty much the same orbit as SOHO, but transmits in black and white. And there were the images were on that one as well. So they were getting supposedly exactly the same fault as on SOHO. I just don't believe that.
Yeah. The second point I wanted clarification on is one mustn't assume that these images have been hidden by NASA. Indeed, they're there for all to see.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If you can troll through the millions of SOHO images. What we do with Jose is he gets them in live time. So we don't have to go trawling through SOHO's images. He actually picks them up as they're being transmitted. And
how does he do that?
He's got around £50,000 worth of equipment, which is just for this. So he has a small satellite dish. He has it linked up to a sun computer. It takes every image off SOHO automatically. It doesn't have to be there. So every morning when he wakes up, he can go and trail through them. And when he finds an interesting one, he pulls it off and transmits it to us.
When we talk about images, of course, we're talking about hundreds that already have been amassed that will be shown at the National Space Centre between 24th and 27th of January. So why don't we give our viewers an opportunity to have you comment on just a few of those images? Mm-hmm.
Well, this what we've done on the presentation is we've split them into different sections, because there's most definitely different types. We have discs, we have rods, which is this kind of device. We have spinners, as we call them, that are the typical flying saucer type object. This particular object has been seen probably about 10 times over the last 18 months, looking somewhat like a candle. That's a close-up at the end of it. This was a different kind of object. This was an interesting one in that, as you can see, it's pretty close, or seems pretty close to the sun's surface. And you see the lights, there are 4 lights within the tube. Originally that was 6, and 2 of them just came out the top and moved away. So when this image was taken, there were only 4 left. This very similar, but again, it's, as you can see, it's a different kind of object. That's the original shot. It appears to be in the corona of the sun, but I suspect actually it isn't. It's very hard to gauge the size of these things, but when we get a full shot of the sun, it's 740,000 kilometers it's covering, so it's covering a hell of a lot of area there. Again, that's an interesting one, in that it looks like the solar wind is actually blowing against it and making a trail to the left hand side. That was an object that took 4 hours to transverse from left to right across across the sun.
So you've actually got images where there is definite movement.
Yeah, one of them, which we entitled Dive, which will be shown at the Space Centre, we actually took it because, again, NASA was saying, no, this was just an aberration of the CCD, and we showed the object quite clearly moving down towards the sun and then doing a right turn and going off into space. So then they came back and told us that was an asteroid. So you can't win, unfortunately. These are, we put this under the name of trails, but actually it's very hard to see on this camera actually, but if you look in the centre, there's actually a disc there, the traditional UFO shaped disc with these rather large whatevers, appendages coming out of it. And this is seen time and time again. We have something like 150 objects based around that kind of sign. There's a close-up. Again, it's a little bit burned out on here, but you can see that's the central object, and this appears to be some kind of power or light being shone from it. There again is a small one. This is a good shot in that it shows the coverage of image you normally get. This is a plastic disc across the sun so it doesn't burn out the camera. And there again you can see an object with again another trail coming out of it. There you have again standard UFO shaped object with a trail of light. There was another one a couple of days later, and there was a close-up of it. The sharper edges are because of the pixelation of the image. It's obviously quite a big blow-up from the original. I can just show you one or two of these strange objects here. This is an interesting one, and this is just a standard comet, and you can see there's no signs at all that this looks like any of the other objects. As you can see, it's a continuous line. There are no flashing intervals between, but that one has. This particular one, it's flashing all the way, stops there, starts again, and right at the end of it is a UFO shaped object. That again, time after time we get objects like this that have these red bands behind. Seems to be some kind of pulsing light that follows the object along. Then we get these strange ones which are very hard to categorise because it really doesn't look like anything, does it? But that's a close-up. But again, we took this to Dragon to ask, could this be a camera fault? And it was no camera fault he could think of would give that kind of shape. Now this is a beauty, because this quite simply shows there is a flying saucer-shaped object, a disc-shaped object here. Band of light shooting out one direction and a band of light shooting out the other one. That must be hundreds of miles long if you go off the ratio of the sun against the camera there. There you have it, an object doing exactly the same thing, but here you have another object which came from it. Okay, this is an interesting one in that basically people could say this was a CCD fault. If you have a bright light, this could be just the flaring of the light in the CCD. When we sharpen the image up, again, pretty much it could be anything. But when we ask the EDX computer to draw up the pixel lines inside, there again you have another disc-sized UFO inside that light. This one was absolutely fascinating. We nicknamed it the Klingon because it looks very much like the old Klingon warships from the pictures. There you have the object. There you have it in close-up. Now this was on the screen for 5 different shots. This covered the best part of 5 hours. It was coming towards the camera because it was getting bigger all the time, and it came closer and closer and then disappeared and turned into this. We wondered whether this could be the same thing as the original, And in fact, when we did an animation of it, that original shape will fit perfectly inside there. So we think they are the same thing. And a couple of days later along came the Enterprise.
I mean, they are extraordinary shapes, and let's be absolutely clear again, no possibility that these could be pixel faults or anything like that.
I don't believe so. I don't think that's a credible argument at all. There are one or two on there could be argued just because there isn't enough detail, but this is no way a pixel fault, for instance. This is the original shot. It hasn't been blown up at all, so it was very, very close to the camera. Again, there's an emboss of it. Again, you're back to the same shape again. Same shape through all these, or most of these images. There's an outline of it. There again, separate shot, not the same shot, but look at the centre of it. Exactly the same shape again.
Okay, let's take a look at a couple of more images which stand out for you. Now we're going to take a look at some images which I think are striking and will come across as absolutely amazing to not only UFO enthusiasts, but I suspect a great many people without the slightest bit of interest in this subject, because these images here simply defy belief.
Mm-hmm. We're hoping actually at the Space Centre a lot of skeptics come along, because I want them to see this and explain it, because here we have again, you have an eighth of the sun image, and we have this. A close-up shows you what, there's got to be some kind of structured craft, it just has to be. This came again towards the camera over 6 different shots. There's a black and white version. Again, you can see the amount of disturbance around the centre of the object. But after 5 images, it suddenly faded to this, then to that, and then disappeared. This is actually not a brilliant picture. I wasn't too impressed with this originally, because I believe this could have been a camera fault. But when we look closely at it, that's what we come up with, which again is a bit nondescript, could be anything. But only days later, down in this portion of the screen, we see a very similar object. Indeed, is it the same object? Different sides of the sun, 4 days difference in between them, but almost exactly the same shape.
Now, I mean, this kind of image here, to all intents and purposes, could have been plucked out of a science fiction film.
Yep, absolutely. Especially when you blow it up like that. Not only is it very beautiful, it's just a stunning image, isn't it?
Talking about films, of course, as we wrap this up now, there is one particular image that you and your colleagues were found quite striking and actually gave a nickname to. I believe you nicknamed it the Disney UFO.
Image, absolutely.
Can we share that with our viewers?
Can. And that's the Disney image. That is unretouched, exactly as it came off the satellite. Very, very beautiful. Even as it is, you can quite plainly see in the centre a disc-shaped object, the pink object in the middle there. Enormous amounts of disturbance around it. What appears to be some kind of, let's just say, a flame for the chance of putting a name on it. And then again you have these red lines behind it, almost like a beat, as though it's moving through the heavens based on that. So we run it through the edit system, putting different filters in to enhance it. Then we enlarged it, and again you can see an almost puck-shaped object in the centre with a tower type appendage on the top. And again this, whatever this is, very, very striking there, very strong. Again, putting different filters on to enhance it.
And we should perhaps explain at this point that the images that people are now seeing on our website are infinitely more detailed in real time.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's no blurred.
Nope.
I mean, these are absolutely crystal clear,
yep,
sharp, defined images. And all of these, and a great many other images as well, of course, are going to be presented at the National Space Centre by your good self, and there'll be input from your colleagues, no doubt, as well. So if you have a message, as I'm sure you do, for people watching this webcast broadcast right now, what would it be? Would it be to urge people to come along? Because I understand that the capacity at the lecture theatre at the National Space Centre isn't exactly that great, but interest really now is starting to prick up. So
yeah,
it's a case of how do people get in touch with you? But why would anybody wish to come along to the National Space Centre to see these images? What is so different about them that you've perhaps not already alluded to?
I think the major thing is that it's very easy for the knockers to say, mankind has been involved, somebody's fiddled the camera, somebody's messed around with it, this is a fake or whatever. These are NASA's own photographs. They are the originals. You'll see the originals, then you'll see our enhancements. If you're saying these are false, then you're saying NASA is not being straight. I don't believe that at all. The other thing I want to do is I want to get people who've maybe been interested and always doubted and wondered, here's your proof. But we also want the skeptics. We want the people who are always knocking it. Come along and look for yourself. I don't think you'll be able to knock these. These will be shown, by the way, in the Space Theatre. So they'll be using the space screens, which are about 12 feet across. So there'll be plenty of views for everybody. And there are about 150 seats per evening available.
Now, I should very quickly mention that as part of the admission, you're making these images available to those people who turn up at the National Space Centre.
That's right. Everything they see at the Space Centre will be put on a CD for them. Also, there's lots we don't have time to show, so they'll be on there as well. There should be something like 350 of these images, together with the Hastings photographs, of course, which is something that you were in your magazine, which again show immense amounts of detail on a photograph taken by, as you know, two pilots, David Hastings and David Patterson. And they also will be shown at the exhibition. Fantastic.
Well, we wish you, Mike, and all your colleagues at EuroSETI every success with these lectures at the National Space Centre in Leicester. That's on the evenings of the 24th, the 25th and the 26th of January. And our message to all you who are now watching this broadcast is to contact a number which will very, very shortly appear on your screens and book your tickets now.